Begin Self-Publishing, episode number 21. How to sell your books through bookshops, with Debbie Young.
Interested in self-publishing but don't know where to start? Want to get your book onto Amazon? Want to hold your paperback book in your hands? Learn how on the Begin Self-Publishing podcast with your host, Tim Lewis.
On today's show, I'm going to be interviewing Debbie Young, who is a prolific author and blog editor of the Alliance of Independent Authors blog. She's currently working on a book, How to Sell Your Books Through Bookshops, for the Alliance of Independent Authors. So obviously today I'm going to be talking to you about that subject, Debbie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So thanks very much for inviting me.
So the first question I want to ask you is, how should an indie author approach a bookstore to see if they will stock their book? Where should they start?
Well, actually, I think the best place to start is stepping back from your actual book and just get into the habit of going into bookshops, getting to the point where you feel comfortable in bookshops, talking to the booksellers in there, where you're picking up a feel for how bookshops operate, getting to know the individual bookshops, and it's particularly those near where you live, and building up a relationship. Get used to being a bookshop customer, and you will be much more comfortable going in there when the time comes when you have a book to launch and to talk to them about. I hear far too many authors saying to me, I want to take my book into a bookshop, but God, I haven't been there for ages. Where do I start? And I think, well, not there. If you already are known to the staff of your local bookshop, and we'll talk not just about selling books through your local bookshop, but about dealing with big chains as well, big buyers. But if you become known to the individual staff who work in your shop, in your local shop, then they will be much more receptive when you go in, because they'll see you as a regular customer and somebody who is supporting their shop and helping them to keep their shop going. Booksellers quite often have experiences to report where customers have come in and gone on to them about how great it is that they can buy their books on Amazon, that they get people, the new buzzword for what people do is called showrooming, where people will go into a shop of any kind, not necessarily a bookshop, look at a product and then buy it online because they reckon they can get it cheaper online. And people can be quite brazen about this and quite rude, really, to the booksellers. A local bookseller that I know well has said to me that he's had customers come in, ask his advice about a book, get his help in finding the right book for their purposes. He will tell them all about it, and then when he's told them everything he can, and they've made lots of sort of buying signals and sounding like they're really interested, he'll say, well, okay, shall I wrap it up for you then? And they'll say, oh, no, it's all right. I'll buy it online from Amazon because it'll be cheaper. Which is without thinking how crass they were being, how rude, and how much of the bookseller's time they've just wasted when he could have been serving other customers or doing some of his admin or all the other things that he needs to do in his day. So the first rule really is to be a good bookshop customer and try to understand how bookshops work. Try to view the shop from the other side of the book-selling counter. And suddenly, when you start to look into how bookshops operate, you will become aware of all of the constraints that are on them and why their responses to you might be as they are. A lot of authors are quite shocked when they realise that a bookseller will expect to have around a 40% discount on their book in order to stock it. Indie authors are often operating on very slim margins themselves on their print books. And so to then give away 40% to somebody else for stocking it could mean that they're then making a loss on a sale through a bookshop. Now, the reason that the bookseller is asking for 40% isn't because they are greedy or mean or grasping.
Yeah.
It's because they have a lot of costs to cover. You're effectively adding a middleman into your sales chain, and that middleman, the bookstore, has rent to pay, council tax, staff costs, fuel, advertising, insurance, all of these things. And when you start to look at all of those things that a bookshop has to cover, you begin to wonder how any bookshops actually stay in business.
I know. Well, I mean, when you look at the financial side of actually somebody running an independent bookstore, I think their margins are so tight. In terms of actually which provider to use, I mean, I think with CreateSpace, it's not really feasible, is it, in terms of the margins involved, to actually get a book into a bookstore from CreateSpace?
Yeah, the margins are lower, the quality is lower as well, because the paper tends to be a bit sort of cheaper and rougher, which although to the average reader probably wouldn't be visible. I mean, we authors are much more sensitive about these things and how our precious babies emerge into the world. But the big thing with a book that's published through CreateSpace is that it will have that telltale little bit of print at the back that makes it clear that it's been printed by Amazon. And whereas, while that won't faze some booksellers, others, it's like having the devil walk into their shop.
It's a red flag, isn't it? Basically?
Yeah, it really is, yeah. And they just will not stock it on principle. Not all of them. Some of them are more relaxed about Amazon than others. And I suspect it partly depends on whether how many people they've had in their shop saying that they're going to buy their books on Amazon because they're cheaper.
Yeah.
So also, if you are buying the books if you're doing a print on demand through CreateSpace, it's not easy physically to get your books into the bookshops. But if you go through Lightning Source or Ingram Spark, produce your print on demand, then they will make the books available through the normal wholesalers so that it's possible for a bookshop to order your books in. And you set the discounts when you set up your book on Ingram Spark or Lightning Source. You determine what discounts you will allow to each book to the bookshops. And you also set whether you are happy to accept sale or return, which is another big issue. Just going back for a minute to understanding how bookshops operate, one of the things that that authors should bear in mind is that the service that booksellers normally have from the wholesalers is that they buy in their books on sale or return, so that if they don't sell a book after a few weeks, they can return it at no loss to them. So now you don't have to do that. You don't have to offer your book on sale or return, because if a shop has your book and doesn't sell it and returns it to you, it's pretty unlikely that it's going to be in a pristine, saleable state. And also, of course, then there's postage incurred and all that sort of thing. So, but bookshops are in a privileged position in a way, in that they have this no risk deal when they take on a book from a big wholesaler. And that's one of the reasons that they can stay in business. And that's also a reason that you don't see books having end of season sales in the same way that you do clothes shops or any other kind of shop, because the books that don't sell don't have to be sold off at a reduced cost or reduced margin, because they can be returned eventually back to the publisher. And that's how books end up in remainder shops, is that they're the ones that get sent back by the sale or return mechanism to the publisher, and the publisher either puts them into a remainder shop or pulps them, which is a cruel, hard way to to end the life of a book. But that's just how the business operates.
If you're an indie author and you use something like Ingram Spark to do print on demand, and a bookshop actually orders, say, 10 of your books, and then they sell sort of 6 of them, would Ingram Spark therefore send you back those 4 copies that they don't sell and they return then? How does that work with print on demand?
If you've ticked the sale or return box, they would get returned to Ingram, and you would be charged for them. So you would cover the cost. You wouldn't get the physical books, I don't believe, but you would be charged for them. So you would be invoiced on your Ingram bill for them. So it will have cost you not to sell that book, which is one reason why a lot of indie authors don't tick the sale or return box, because they really don't want to have that risk. Which, for the odd book, it's okay, but supposing that happens, supposing that you had a big take-up by a big chain like Waterstones decided to put 10 of each of your books in each of their shops because you'd had some fantastic piece of publicity that made them think you were going to be a great seller, and then they didn't sell, then you could end up being hit for hundreds of books. And I've seen small publishers go out of business because they've made that decision and have just been swamped by returns for which they've had to cover the costs, and it's just put them out of business. Now, I don't think that indie authors need to do that, and I think unless you are very comfortable doing it and can afford to make some losses that way, that you should do it. But at least by making your book available through Ingram Spark or Lightning Source and making it available in that way, at least you're giving the shop the opportunity to buy them if they want to. And we mustn't forget that the service that booksellers provide in bookshops is actually really personal service, and they will order in the one-off orders for a customer. If a customer comes in and says, I want this particularly obscure book that they don't have in the shop, they will always order it in for you. And my local bookseller always likes to point out that his ordering service is as good as Amazon's, in that you can get next day delivery on most books, and it doesn't cost you delivery because it goes into the shop and you pick it up from the shop. I mean, yes, you've got to go to the shop to pick it up, but what Amazon is doing is just making the point of delivery your home rather than the shop, really. Otherwise, it's pretty much what bookshops have always done. But unless you have your book available, if somebody goes into a bookshop and orders your book, they won't be able to get it in for you. You know, they'll say, oh no, we can't order it. So by making it available, and this is one of the reasons why Ally recommends that indie authors do their print on demand both through CreateSpace and Ingram Spark, is so that you have that opportunity, so that although booksellers might not order in vast quantities, they can order, so a customer's order will pull one through for them. So you've opened up the possibilities.
Yeah. What would you say is the biggest mistake that indie authors make when they're trying to get their books stocked by bookstores?
I think having a sense of entitlement and going into a bookshop and just assuming that because that bookshop is their local bookshop and they live around the corner from it, that the bookshop will automatically stock their titles, regardless of what their book is about, what it looks like, or anything like that. And it's really sad because authors obviously put their hearts and souls into their books and are terribly proud, and it's terribly exciting when they have their first printed copies in their hand. And to go and to make the wrong kind of approach to a bookshop can be absolutely heartbreaking. And booksellers don't like to reject them either, because in my experience they seem to be a kindly lot who want to support authors, but authors also need to help themselves a little bit. So I've heard too many stories about people marching into their local bookshop saying, well, here's, I'm from this town and I've just written a book, how many copies would you like? Without understanding how the bookshop operates, without conveying what's special about their book, giving the bookseller the professional style information that they need to make the decision whether to stock it or not, and then being very affronted and sometimes even rude, astonishingly, to the booksellers when the booksellers say, well, no, sorry, I don't think we can sell that, we won't stock it. There is no entitlement to have a book stocked in a shop, even if you live in the flat over the shop. You don't have the right to have your book sold there. There are so many books vying for shelf space in a bookshop that you have to earn your place, and it's a bit like you have to picture yourself as being a participant in a balloon debate, if you like. You have to make the case for why your book should be put on the shelves and all the others jettisoned, rather than yours being jettisoned. And because the booksellers are approached all the time, not only by indie authors who are taking in their 1, 2 or 3 books to sell, but also they have publishers' reps coming round to them regularly, offering hundreds of books which they are confident are going to be good sellers. I was once in my local bookshop, one of my local bookshops, and the proprietor said to me, "Oh, I've just had somebody come in, a rep come in to see me, and he's pitched 100 books to me, 10 seconds per book. What a great use of time." And you think, wow. And also that any of those 100 books he sells, he will get one invoice across all of those 100. So it's very cost-effective and time-effective in terms of admin time and management. and accounting time compared with having to deal with if all of the shop. Imagine if all of the books in the shop were from indie authors, then you'd have one invoice per book, one invoice per author, and all those individual dealings that you'd have to do it would be hugely time consuming. So in terms of use of time, which for a bookseller costs money, it's much less cost effective for him to deal with an indie author than with a trade published author who is represented by a sales rep along with hundreds of other authors.
Yeah. So, what do you think is the main reason why there aren't more self-published books, especially in like the bigger stores, like the big chains and that sort of thing? Is it that admin, or is it something else?
I think it's partly because a lot of indie authors just won't go there, and that can be for good reason, because a lot of successful indie authors are doing very well online. They're happy with selling e-books, and so they're not even bothering with print books. I mean, Joanna Penn, for example, who's a big successful early adopter of self-publishing, her business model excludes print books through shops. She has some print-on-demand books because it's good to be able to take some physical books to speaking events and that sort of thing. But she doesn't even bother with bookshops because she thinks it's not worth the game's not worth a candle, really. And she's arrived at that conclusion for very sound business reasons. She's a very, very, very shrewd businesswoman, and that's fine, and she's comfortable with that. And there are others who are earlier in their career, an earlier stage of their career, who are just very shy and would rather die than go in and make a pitch to a bookseller because it's all too scary. And I mean, a lot of authors are shy people who aren't comfortable in going and pushing themselves in that way, or in marketing themselves at all, in fact. And so you need people often decide, either for the right reasons or the wrong reasons, that they're not even going to try bookstores. There's a lot of rumour about that puts people off trying, even if they would, in theory, be game for it. There was various rumours keep going back and forth about Waterstones in particular. For example, there are various authors in Ally who have had emails when they've tried to sell their book into Waterstones head office saying, "Oh no, we don't deal with indie authors, company policy." But there are also plenty of people who report good success stories with their local branches of Waterstones and have built up really good, strong relationships at a local level. And the local managers have a certain amount of freedom to choose to stock local books, because like supermarkets, booksellers, bookshops will angle their stock towards their local market. So, for example, if you have a shop that is in a touristy area, you'll have lots of tourist guides and that sort of thing. And in any bookshop, you'll have a certain amount of books about the local area. One particular success story that I'm thinking of is a lady called Sandy Osborne, who has published, she's writing a series of books called Girl Cop. First one is called Girl Cop. I think the second one is Girl Cop in Trouble. She is her day job is a police, I can't remember the technical, what's the police
Forensic,
officer. I'm trying not to say policewoman, police officer. Sandy is a police officer in Bath, and she is a very well-known figure locally, and she's also got a very big social circle in Bath through doing amateur dramatics and sports, run marathons, all sorts of things. Terrific woman, and great, really fun chick lit writer. When she was launching her first book, she asked in her local Waterstones if she could have her launch there, and she'd been going in there for years buying books. It's a big local bookshop, and they said, "Well, we're not sure about having it during shop time, but you can have it after the shop's closed." So she had her launch at 8:00 in the evening, and she worked like mad to get lots of people to attend it. She had something like 150 people turned up. I was there; the place was absolutely crammed full of people. She spent, after doing a really good presentation, she spent about an hour signing books. There were people queuing out of the shop. And ever since then, Waterstones
have stopped her.
Very keen on her. She's got her books constantly stock there. They did her second launch. They've been really good to her with promotional space, and whatever she does, she'll be doing in partnership with the local Waterstones. It's also led to local relationships with other bookshops in Bath. Bath has 3 really good bookshops, independent bookshops, and so she is living proof that by building up a relationship at local level, getting to know the staff, proving your credibility, proving that you can drive people into the shop, then you will win over a bookshop. Because ultimately, what a bookseller's dream is to have authors who will drive people into their shops, bring them business, and drive business directly drive money into their tills, really. So if you can prove to your local bookshop that you have the power to do that, then you will build a good relationship with them.
From the sounds of what you're saying then, that to get your book into a local bookstore, if that's what you're keen to do, is certainly achievable. But have there been really any cases of success of people getting their books stocked in like multiple branches of a big bookstore, either in the UK or the US, that you know of?
Yes, yeah. Yes, and what happens as well with the big chains is that people talk to each other, in the different shops will talk to each other, so that there are a few Scottish authors I'm thinking of who have started off by getting their books into their local branch in Dundee and have then gone on to get their books into Edinburgh and Glasgow. They're Scottish, they're thrillers with a Scottish theme, and so they're very relevant for bookshops all over Scotland, and they've just gradually spread. And of course, if you can say to a more distant branch of Waterstones, well, my local one's doing really well, and you've got some proof on that, then that will help you get your book in there. There are also central buying facilities, which are harder to crack because obviously everybody's going for them, including publishers. I was talking to our local branch of Foyles. I'm based near Bristol, and we're very lucky. We've got a lovely branch of Foyles there. And I was chatting to one of the booksellers in Foyles who said, well, you can send your submission to the central buyers division, but make sure you make a really good case as to why they should stock your book. So everybody's open to doing that. You can do that, but it will be harder because you have much more competition, and it's even more important to make sure that you're making a good sales pitch to the buyer. Then it will help you enormously if you have a good author website with all your credentials on there. The sort of website that every indie author should have, really, where you've got some testimonials, quotes, information about your books, information about yourself, all that sort of thing, where somebody who is curious about your book can go to find more credentials and find conviction about the calibre of your work and your saleability as an author. You should also have an information sheet, book information sheet per book, which sums up on a single A4 sheet all the salient points about your book, including the technical details like ISBN and availability and price and the cover image and that sort of thing, but also key selling points, really, so that they can see at a glance on that sheet of paper exactly what your sales pitch is. And so when you go in to take your book to make your approach to a bookseller, if you're doing it in person rather than through the central buying facility, you should have one of those that you can leave with them, as well as your book, which will give them everything they need to know at a glance and make the best use of their time, be respectful of their time. Some authors kind of expect that a bookseller will read their book if you leave it with them. Now, booksellers don't spend all day reading books any more than bakers spend all day eating buns, So it's unrealistic to expect the bookseller to actually read the whole of the book, but it does happen. And I have had authors say to me that they took their book in on spec, and next thing they knew, the bookseller they'd spoken to had come back and said, I love this book, we want to stock lots, because they have actually read it, but that's
it's an exception. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. In terms of getting your books into libraries, are there any real differences in terms of getting them into libraries as opposed to bookstores?
Well, lots of similarities, really, in that, again, you're vying for shelf space, and you've got to make your case as to why your book should be on the shelf rather than anybody else's. Again, there's a lot of admin attached to a surprising amount of admin attached to putting a book on the shelf in the library, because it has to be documented and catalogued and all that sort of thing. Yes, more similarities than differences, really. But again, you need to do your research, understand how the library operates, understand how their buying system operates, because that will be different within local authorities and different groups of libraries. Also, there's lots of different sorts of libraries, because of course there's university libraries and technical libraries and professional libraries, as well as the Common Garden Public Library that we all hopefully all use and value. So it's worth finding out. You need to do the research really just go into your public library and ask how their buying system works, and they'll be able to refer you up the line to who you need to approach. We've written a chapter in the book that we published, that Alli published last year, called Opening Up to Indie Authors. There's a chapter on getting a book into bookshops. There's also a chapter on getting a book into libraries that explains it in a bit more detail.
I know I previously talked to Jane Davis on an interview about small print runs.
Yes.
Do you think I can see for somebody who is allowing returns of their books that it might make more sense to actually have a print run in a way, simply as it will keep the costs down a bit. But do you think there's a benefit for doing small print runs if you're hoping to get your books stocked in bookstores or libraries?
I wouldn't be tempted. I think there is a case for small print runs, and I think it's very useful to know that it's possible to use companies other than CreateSpace and Ingram Spark and Lightning Source to produce small print runs. I've done it myself using a small company who are based in Exeter called Imprint Digital.
Yeah.
And I've had maybe 100 of a book run off at a time, where I know I'm going to be hand selling those books, but through other routes than bookshops. So, for example, if I'm going to, I sell books. I live in a little village, and I've got a permanent display in our village shop. So my small print run will go partly into there. I go to quite a few events as a speaker, so I always take my print run books along there. And I always have a few in my car, one in my handbag, that sort of thing. So I'm prepared to sell a book any way you like. I've used a few of them to go into local bookshops, but I wouldn't normally use them for that. I would just, because I've got them set up on Ingram Spark anyway, I would just expect the bookshops to order their books that way, because otherwise I've then got the cost and the hassle of taking the books physically to the bookshop. So there's petrol, parking, my time involved in all of that, but if you'd have to sell a lot of books that way to make it worth your while, really, in terms of the time and costs, or indeed postage. If I was going to post them to a bookshop, rather than take them physically, then postage is quite substantial. And my books are quite slim. I don't like blockbusters, but even postage on a slim book is substantial these days. But I know that some people, and I believe Jane is one of these, some people set great store by the appearance of their book and want it to be really, really beautiful. They're not happy with the standards from Ingram Spark or CreateSpace, or they would rather have a better standard, work to a higher standard. It's not that those standards that Lightning Source or Ingram Spark or CreateSpace aren't good enough. They would just like to add that little bit extra, and therefore they go to an alternative provider where they can specify a higher quality stock for the paper, where they have more control, where they can have a better cover and a fancier cover, really, with options that aren't available through those print-on-demand suppliers. One of the other success stories, actually, that I should have mentioned earlier is Piers Alexander, who is the author of The Bitter Trade. He negotiated with W.H. Smith for his books to be in all of the airport shops this year, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Incredible coup. And his book, he wanted to be absolutely superb in terms of production quality. So he had an embossed cover, which you just couldn't get with one of the print-on-demand suppliers. It's an extra that they don't offer. So he invested a lot of money of his own money up front in getting this beautiful book produced with this splendid looking cover. which was then sold through airport shops, which is, that's a lot of indie authors' dream, is to be walking through on the way to their holidays and see their books on the shelves in the Smiths and the airport.
Yeah.
So he's achieved that, and that's a great success story. And he did that through the central buying system.
Okay. So obviously, as we discussed earlier, you're writing a book for the Alliance of Independent Authors about how to get your books into bookstores. Is that going to be like the existing Alli books, where it's part of, if you're a member of the Alliance of Independent Authors, that will be free, or is this just going to be a separate standalone book available on Amazon?
No, it'll be free. It will be like the other guidebooks at Alli for members. The ebook will be free. You'll be able to download it free of charge as an ebook in the format of your choice. But if you want to buy a paperback, it will also be available as a paperback, and there will be an ebook available to buy for non-members as well. So that will be available in the new year.
Well, as I discussed earlier, it's I think just for the membership of the Facebook group for the Alliance of Independent Authors, it's worth the fee for actually joining it. So with all these extra guides coming up, this is really going to sweeten the pot, so to speak.
Yeah, well, we hope so, yes. And there are more books coming out as well. There's a new one coming out about selling your rights, and they're an updated edition of the Choosing a Self-Publishing Service, which is a very good overview of which service to use and how to use it. So we're getting starting to amass quite a library of indispensable guides. So it's excellent value.
Okay. And in terms of your own books and your own speaking and all the rest of it, where can people find out about Debbie Young, the author?
I've got a website called www.authordebbieyoung.com, and amazingly, I appear to be the only Debbie Young on Amazon at the moment. Touch wood. So you can just plug into Amazon, put in Debbie Young, and click on any book that's got my name on it to go to my author page, and put on the author central thing, making sure all my books put together with a little bit of bio. And I've got a mailing list that people can join from my website. To be honest, I don't mail out to subscribers very often, only really when I've got a new book coming out. But I will have a new book coming out apart from the bookstores one. I've got a new collection of short stories called Marry in Haste, which will be published, launched in the new year, which are humorous short stories about dating, love and marriage. The usual wry humour that anyone who's read my previous short stories will be familiar with. So it's a nice balance actually, because I'm working on both the non-fiction side with the Alli guidebooks and working on some other non-fiction projects as well, and also on the fiction. So I enjoy writing both, and I think there are more and more indie authors who are diversifying and doing both as well. I mean, like yourself, you've got your podcast helping others, and you've also got your fiction writing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good, fun, balanced way to go.
Yeah, well, I think once you, one of the good things about being a self-published author is that it shows you the whole new world of sort of business that's out there just online, because you kind of have to. It's the cheapest way to run a business is online now. So I think having a mix of, you don't feel constricted like you have to be just a tortured writer sitting at your desk just writing fiction, or just writing non-fiction, or doing stuff like that anymore. You can do whatever takes your fancy in a way.
That's right. With the conventional publisher, you'd be more likely to be pushed into, sort of pigeonholed really, into a particular genre, and be encouraged to use a different pen name if you were writing something in a different genre, supposedly to avoid confusing the reader. But I think readers are more savvy than that, really.
Oh, yeah.
Not that used. And when the best indie authors will be making it very clear with their covers and their titles, what genre a book is in. I don't think anyone is going to pick up my bookstore's book thinking that they're about to sit down and read a book of short stories, for example. So all exciting, very exciting times, and much more sociable times for we authors than it ever.
Anyway, it's been very good to speak to you today, Debbie, and thanks very much for coming on the show.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please stop by iTunes and rate and leave a review. This helps make the show more visible. For free resources, show notes, and other helpful content, join the community at beginselfpublishing.com.